All eyes in the synagogue were fixed on Jesus. Then he began to speak to them. This text is being fulfilled today, even as you listen. And he won the approval of all, and they were astonished by the gracious words that came from his lips. They said, "This is Joseph's son, surely." But he replied, "No doubt you will quote me the saying, 'Physician, heal yourself,' and tell me, 'We have heard all that happened in Capernaum. Do the same here in your own countryside.'" And he went on, "I tell you solemnly, no prophet is ever accepted in his own country." There were many widows in Israel, I can assure you, in Elijah's day, when heaven remained shut for 3 years and 6 months, and a great famine raged through the land. But Elijah was not sent to any one of these. He was sent to a widow at Zarephath, a Sidonian town. And in the prophet Elisha's time, there were many lepers in Israel, but none of these was cured, except the Syrian Naaman. When they heard this, everyone in the synagogue was enraged. They sprang to their feet and hustled him out of the town, and they took him up to the brow of the hill their town was built on, intending to throw him down the cliff. But he slipped through the crowd and walked away. What a scene! Here's this son of the carpenter, who for 30 years had worked alongside his father at the carpenter's bench. And one day, he gets up in his own local synagogue, having been away doing some preaching first in other places. He gets up in his local synagogue and he challenges the people with the words we've just heard. You can imagine what they must have thought. Goodness gracious, who does he think he is? His father's a carpenter. Okay, so that's a middle kind of job in Israel. It's not the lowest of the low, but it's certainly not one of the people who should be teaching us. And they all get very upset about this. And they decide that they will deal to this whippersnapper. Even though he's 30 years old, I guess there were probably some older people there. You can imagine them calling him out and taking him up to the top of the hill. And probably someone then said, "Oh, what are we going to do? We can't do this, this is wrong," or, something. And I imagine they got engaged in a bit of heated discussion about whether they should be doing this. And while they were arguing with one another, Jesus just slipped off and walked away. Smart man. It makes me ask the question, how do we treat people in our midst who are saying things that we don't always want to hear? I think at the moment of the issue of child poverty in New Zealand. We are slipping further and further back in that regard. The statistics will tell you, the human life stories will tell you, my own experience with families tells me. But how many of us want to hear that? Because if we really hear it, we may be forced to consider the way we're living and to see what we can do about it. There are many ways we can do something about it. There is just the simple neighbourly gesture of befriending people, or if you're growing vegetables in your garden, taking some to the next door neighbour for their meal. There is the way of writing letters to the paper to let your voice be heard, or writing a letter to your Member of Parliament or your local city councillor. There is the way of volunteering at a food bank, or going out and just sitting beside people on a park bench and talking to them and listening to them. This is what Jesus is calling us to do. And he's saying a prophet's not heard in their own country. Can we respond to the prophets who are around us now talking to us about this? Caritas Aotearoa New Zealand puts out some very good written material and publicity notices about this. I wonder how many of us have taken the time to sit and read it and think about it, reflect on it, and feel called to action. Maybe this is the year when we can get going. The children are just back at school now, and maybe there's something we can do to help a family in our neighbourhood who isn't living at the top of the breadline. May God be with you this week.